Barry.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Money Matters with Shannon Jackson, the personal finance show focused on moving you forward financially. On today's show, surveys show mental health and money problems are often intricately linked. And that's what we're going to focus on today, how mental health affects our financial wealth. Now, my guest today is going to offer you advice on how you can be aware of the connection between mental health and financial wealth, and how you can avoid making those money mistakes. She's a self-proclaimed budget warrior, professional speaker, financial wellness educator, financial blogger, and finance journalist who contributes regularly to rates.ca, as well as the Globe and Mail, Young and Thrifty, Refinery 29, and Best Health magazine. Zandile Chiwanza, welcome to Money Matters and thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Before we get started into our discussion, can you share with our viewers a little bit more about yourself and how you got started in the world of finance?
Sure. So thank you so much for that introduction to what I do now. But my journey really began about 12 years ago now when I came to Canada as an international student and I was studying journalism in Ottawa. And towards the end of that program, we had a business journalism course, which I chose to take. And there was a personal finance class in that course. And there was a bit of a twist. I had never heard of the term personal finance at that time, even though I was financially responsible for myself when I got here. But that term I had never heard it before. So I remember tweeting excitedly about how I was going to be learning more about personal finance. And now I'd say that the test that came in that program was probably the best thing that happened to me. So our professor said, we're going to have a test on personal finance in Canada. So, like we were being tested on terms such as RESP, what those stand for. And I didn't know any of that, to be frank. And I came last. And instead of the first person getting some kind of award, the last person in the class got a gift. And that was The Wealthy Baba by David Tilton. So that's a personal finance book that many know. And that's something that was gifted to me. And as the young budding journalist I was then, I was like, listen, I'm going to learn everything I can about personal finance because I don't want to ever be in that situation again. And so I started to join Facebook groups, forums, bloggers, and really dove into the world of personal finance. I didn't initially put any of that towards myself. I just knew the information. But then when I had to apply for my permanent residency and I needed to pay off my tuition, I realized I needed to apply what I had read and learned pretty fast. And through that journey, I started documenting my journey to financial freedom on Instagram, on Twitter, and a lot of people started messaging me saying, wow, this is amazing. Like, thank you for sharing. This is very relatable information. And I just started talking about finances and writing about it and speaking about it. And the emotional component of that is something that I never saw. I never saw people talking about how money actually made them feel. And I started doing that. And I started taking a course as well called The Trauma of Money. And I learned how to speak about money with a compassionate approach and be able to help people improve their overall relationship with money, because it's not just about financial literacy. There's so many things that impact our personal finance.
I love that story because you really came into it from the education side. You were getting your journalism degree and you had this personal finance course sort of on the side, which really got you started into everything. And I do think it's really important that everyone, if they do have an opportunity to take a personal finance program or course, just to get those basics, I think is really important. So I love that that's how you came into the business. That's really good. So today we're going to focus on how mental health affects financial wealth. And as we mentioned previously, these two components really are connected. Now, Financial Planning Canada does an annual financial stress survey, and it speaks to this, as well as there's a few other surveys as well. But the latest FP Canada Financial Stress Index reveals that one third, or actually more than one third, about 38% of Canadians say money is their biggest concern. And this actually outranks their personal health at 21%, work at 19%, and relationships at 18%. And then the survey also shows that 1 in 3, or about 35% of people, say that financial stress is leading to anxiety, depression, or other mental health issues. And there was also another recent mental health index report from TELUS Health, and it shows that those concerned about affordability and those struggling with overwhelming debt have significantly lower well-being scores than those who felt financially secure. Now, I can speak to this myself as a licensed insolvency trustee, because I meet with people every day who are not only struggling with debt, but they also have coinciding health issues as well. And many clients will tell me that they can't sleep because they're experiencing so much anxiety, or they can't concentrate on other important issues. I've had other clients say that they've had to take a short-term leave from work because of what they're experiencing with their mental health as a result of their finances. And unfortunately, this really is a common story. Now, obviously, these statistics are showing that money is the biggest stressor in the lives of Canadians. So, Zandile, what is your reaction when you hear these kinds of statistics?
I'm not surprised. Money is a tool, right, that we all need, that we all use in this country, but we're never really talking about how it impacts our overall well-being. So I'll say two things: that money and mental health are connected both ways. So you could be a perfectly healthy individual, you lose your job and you're living paycheck to paycheck, and you begin to feel extremely anxious and stressed and depressed at your financial situation. Or you could be in a situation where you already have a mental health condition or symptoms of mental health conditions that can cause you to damage your finances, or can cause you to basically mismanage your money, right? Because if you're already depressed, like I'm talking about people that have to think about brushing their teeth in the morning, can't get out of bed, how are they supposed to pay their bills on time, invest in their future? Those are some of the problems that arise when you already have mental health problems. But I'll say, based off of the studies that you already mentioned, right, there's a clear link between your well-being and the amount of stress that you have when it comes around money. And when we think about wellness in this environment where we're being told to take breaks, go for a walk, visit family more often, and do a lot of these self-care activities, well, how are you supposed to do self-care if you do not have the money? Like, if you cannot afford it, if you're, again, living paycheck to paycheck with this high cost of living environment that we're currently all in, things are very expensive. So people do not have the disposable income to take care of themselves. So if that's happening over a prolonged time, it can continue to become as serious as a condition. You can begin to completely avoid your finances, which means that you can get into some of the much further consequences of debt that I'm sure you've discussed on the show and that you have a lot of experience in. But again, it's just that beginning, knowing that the way you feel in your mind can impact the way that you manage your money. So if someone's telling you to just save and you're saying, I've tried, but there seems to be a disconnect. When I get to the grocery store, I am overspending. I can't stop online shopping. I want to be able to afford a home, but there's not enough money. Some of those, it's depressing, like some of those things can be tough to manage on your own.
Well, and you say as well, when we're stressed with our money situation, it often sort of builds on itself. One example I thought of was clients will come in and they will bring me their bills, but the envelopes aren't even opened. they're they're at a point with their mental health that they can't bring themselves to even just open the envelope and look at those statements. Now, is it possible for this connection between our mental health and our finances to work in a reverse way? If our finances are doing well, what kind of an effect does that have on our mental health?
Well, I will say, I know there's an old sort of saying, and people say that money doesn't buy happiness, but it really does, because you're able to afford more of the things that you want, more of the things that you need, right? Which is something that we can all identify with. When you're setting your goals for the year of what you want to do with your personal finances, if you're able to achieve those, then you know that you can have the motivation to do it again the next year. You know that you'll have a more positive outlook on your life in general. Just being able to pay your bills and on time and in full these days seems to me like a big thing, a big privilege, just because of how, expensive things are, and people are getting laid off as well. That can really impact your overall outlook on finances. Or if you, like you mentioned, one of your clients may have had an illness simultaneously. So if they are looking for ways that you can improve your overall financial wellness that don't involve money, I always suggest that you look at financial self-care. So small things that you can do that don't cost money, that will improve your finances. Like, take a look at your statements over the last couple of months. Identify, where are you overspending? Where are you underspending? Small tasks like that can 100% improve your outlook on your finances. And this is before we even got into some of the major moves that we might all have to make when it comes to our money. I like to focus on those small, free things that we can do for our money and our mental health overall.
Now, often for some, when we're feeling stressed or sad or anxious, we look for ways to make ourselves feel better. And some of that can come from spending or retail therapy or something like that. Now, unfortunately, this can lead to even more overspending, which then brings more stress, and it becomes a vicious cycle, really. And other times it's just the pressure of paying our regular living expenses every month. Maybe we're paying those with a credit card, or there isn't enough income coming in during the month. How can we become more aware of that connection between our mental health and our finances?
So I can say that one of the first things you need to do is you need to sit down and look at what's happening in your accounts. And I don't mean the numbers. I'm saying look at some of the transactions you've made over the past couple of weeks and try to think about how you felt in that moment. If that was a purchase that you wouldn't necessarily do. So for example, I was feeling quite emotionally, I was feeling some type of way the other day, and I went and I got myself Starbucks, and then I went and got myself more Starbucks, and then I went and I got myself a burger and fries. And I wouldn't necessarily usually do that, right? So if I'm looking back at that transaction, I know for a fact the only reason I made those purchases was because I was feeling sad. So at least for me, it's something that I could afford at the time. But the damage comes when you're not able to afford some of the purchases that you make. And I had to put those barriers in place because I used to be that person. I would overspend to self-soothe.
Well, I think being aware of that connection is really that first step. And when we come back from the break, Zandile is going to have some more tips for you, ways you can reduce your financial stress, as well as the anxiety or the mental stress that you might be feeling. And that's coming up when Money Matters returns.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
Are you low on food? Struggling to pay the bills? Overwhelmed by life's challenges? When you need support but don't know where to turn, just dial 211. 211 connects you to the programs or services near you.
211, how can I help you?
211, help starts here.
Welcome back to Money Matters with Shannon Jackson. My guest today is Zandile Chiwanza, financial wellness educator, finance journalist, and financial blogger. And before the break, we talked about the connection between financial stress and mental stress and how each of those affects the other. So I want to focus now on some advice that will help our viewers reduce some financial stress and hopefully as well that mental stress that you might be feeling. And now I know I speak with clients all the time about budgeting, and budgeting really does help. It is basically your starting point. And so it's impossible to plan to be financially responsible until you know where you stand today. And I can't tell you how many people I meet with that don't know how much money they make in income. They also don't know how much they spend on groceries or gas during the month. Now, part of this problem comes from living in an almost cashless society because we can't physically see money exchanging hands when we swipe our debit card. But a budget makes that process a little bit more visible for us. And I always tell people that it'll give you the freedom to spend your money because you'll know exactly where it's going. Now, of course, when you say the word budget, there seems to be this negative connotation. And of course, this can impact our behavior. And some financial experts actually suggest that we shouldn't use the word budget and maybe call it something else, maybe a spending plan or something like that. So, Zandile, what do you think about this idea of the word budget and then the negativity that surrounds it?
I think at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter what you call it, but you need to have a spending plan. And when you look at the word in the dictionary, it literally says a budget is a spending plan. There's no negative connotation to it, right? It's just what we've sort of drummed up to ourselves. When we see the word budget, we think of restriction. We think of sadness. Like, it's not exciting. It's boring, right? But actually, that should excite you. So whatever word that makes you excited and makes you actually want to do the purpose of it, which is budgeting, like actually just having a spending plan, then I am all for it. And I'd say, I know for myself, I don't like the word emergency fund, so I call it a no worries fund, and that helps me. And I even have it in my bank account. So if you don't like the word budget, don't use it. But I'd say that's one thing in personal finance we can all agree on. One of the foundations of personal finance is budgeting.
I agree. And actually, I had another guest on the show, and she used the word opportunity plan, I believe is how she phrased it as well. So I agree with you. Whatever word gets you excited about it is what you should be using. Now, do you advocate that your budget should include some of those things that you actually enjoy doing?
Absolutely. I save for rainy days and for sunny days, and I give them the same priority. I feel like when you are planning for your future and making your future self proud, you should also make your current self proud, because a lot of us work really hard and there's no reason for us to suffer. It doesn't matter how much it is that you put towards yourself, but I think you should always put something aside and get that practice going so that you're taking care of yourself, right? Because you've spoken about that mental health piece. And I know for a long time, I was only putting money towards fixed expenses and paying off debt and really neglecting my joy. And in the end, I actually ended up binge spending sometimes because I felt so restricted. It's like in the same way, I feel like diets don't work. I feel like not budgeting for fun does not work. We all need a little bit of joy in our life. So however much that looks like, it'll depend on everybody. But I started with like $25 a paycheck, I think, just to say, look, this is money I can spend on absolutely anything that I want, and I can save it and accumulate it for bigger things. Or in the moment, if I feel like, hopping into the mall and getting something, then I have money. I know where it's coming from.
I agree with that 100%. Do you have some other budgeting tips that can help viewers in avoiding that overspending urge?
Absolutely. I'd say when it comes to specifically if you already struggle with managing your finances in general, I would say definitely paying your fixed bills first, or at least allocating money towards the fixed things and obviously including savings and investments in those fixed bills. Like I used to treat debt like a bill. And then thereafter, you can start to separate money for yourself, like we said, for fun. Maybe you have some sinking funds for other goals like travel or education or your kids. But I'd say definitely have that money in a separate account. I actually have my fun money on a prepaid credit card. So I'm still getting my cash back on it, but I know that once I use it up, there is no more because I used to put it on my credit card, which was not a great idea because I'd feel like, oh, I actually have a little extra in there. I can go over. But now, yeah, when I'm at zero, I can't go into overdraft on that. So once the fun money is done, the fun money is done. And I think another thing with budgeting is definitely putting some barriers between you and the purchase. And I know we're going to go through some of these things later, but I think it's really important to, if you have a tendency of overspending, is to make sure that you don't have your credit cards on your computer, for example. If you know that you are more inclined to just spend, you need to sort of have some discipline with yourself. And that includes like physically putting barriers. So if your card is already online and you know you can't resist that sale on Amazon Day or something like that, then it means you need to separate yourself from that and take off those cards. And I'd say another one for budgeting in general that has helped me is actually to talk to friends and family about money. So this is something you can do for free. For me, if I know I'm about to make a ridiculous decision, I call my friend. She knows my situation, and I say, I feel like spending this money on this. And then she'll ask me a few questions. And once I talk it out, I realize this doesn't make any sense. And I have other goals that I'm saving towards. And purchase is not done. And we're all happy at the end of the day.
I like that idea of putting that safety net in place, whether it's putting barriers in place for yourself or speaking with friends and family. I like that idea. So we know it's important, of course, to follow our budget. And by following our budget, it will help us to feel a little bit less stressed about our financial situation. But it's also important to be aware of why we're overspending and falling further into debt, and maybe identify the root that's causing that spending behavior. Do you have any tips that viewers can use to recognize the reasons behind their use of money and how we can help them to move forward financially?
Absolutely. As we mentioned previously, for a brief time, is you need to understand your spending habits. You cannot make any changes if you have no idea what's actually going on. So, like I said, one thing that has helped me and has helped other people is to write down a few of your transactions and see how you felt at the time and try and do like a deep dive into what's actually going on. I know journaling is really popular these days, and I think it's such a simple tool that is so helpful. It's like ask yourself a series of questions. How was I feeling when I made this purchase? How do I feel about my finances in general? What do I want for my finances in the future? And I think when you recognize what triggers you, that's another really good way of managing your finances and your mental health better. Because you could be having a perfectly fine day, but if something happens, like you get a really tough email from work or you get some bad news from home, then maybe you might be more inclined to overspend. So once you recognize that those things can happen, you will be able to set barriers for yourself and you will be able to come up with a plan that makes sense for you that might not necessarily make sense to someone like me, right? But that doesn't matter as long as you feel comfortable and you feel emotionally and mentally supported by whatever financial plan you come up with, then that's what's important. And I'd say the last thing is definitely trying to find a different coping mechanism when you want to self-soothe. So for me, instead of shopping, I go for a really long walk with some good music. And initially, I was like, it's not the same. I just want some retail therapy. But I think overall, it's just taught me to slow down and separate myself from those feelings of wanting to get that instant dopamine. So whatever you can replace with shopping for a different coping mechanism, then think about that. Think about the things that make you feel good, and when you feel like you're about to like overspend, maybe try and do a different activity that'll take your mind off of that shopping.
Well, we all experience that fear of missing out. And I think that there's a lot of societal pressures today that we want to keep up with trends and maintain a particular lifestyle. And then we feel this pressure from media and advertising. Can you talk a little bit about these influences and the impact that they're having on our mental health and our financial wealth? Maybe just start with social media and how that's working.
Right. So in the trauma of money, I mentioned I learned how to deal with money from a compassionate approach. And one of their principles is that there are 5 other things apart from financial literacy that impact your overall relationship with money. And one of them is actually societal pressure. So literally what you see on social media can influence and impact how you spend your money in your own household. So if you are maybe a millennial, Gen Z, younger folks, we're online all the time and you're seeing your friend on vacation. Again, buying another bag or, they have a dog or they have things that cost a lot of money. You can start to compare yourself and say to yourself, why am I in this situation? I'm not able to do this. And you start to put a lot of pressure on yourself and you start to feel like, in order to be successful, I need a dog. Maybe I need a house. Maybe I needed this type of car, right? And it's been happening for years. Like media has also played a huge part in how we make decisions to make money. Advertisements are there to make us spend. So if you are seeing a Lululemon advert, for example, or some kind of campaign, and you see this certain type of woman or person wears Lululemon, therefore I need to wear Lululemon. They know how to resonate with us, right? So we end up feeling like we need to spend more money to be the person that we think we are. And then what happens is just a cycle. We continue to spend to become that person when really we could stop and say, what are my values? What do I care about? What will help me grow mentally and financially? And that's what I'm going to spend my money on, and stop that cycle of comparison. So it's definitely something that impacts a lot of people. You're not strange. It's actually normal. And it's time for us as the personal finance community to stop demonizing people that might have like difficulties with overspending when it comes to societal pressures or to gain social approval.
Well, I appreciate everything that you've talked about. Do you have any final thoughts for our viewers?
Definitely. I'd say if you are somebody that has been struggling with your mental health and struggling with stress and anxiety when it comes to your finances, I'd say you need to understand that you're not alone in this. There's a lot of people feeling the exact same way as you. Starting out having conversations, even if it's with someone right next to you right now, have a conversation about money. Reach out to a professional if you need to be able to talk that out, some of those feelings, whether it's a mental health professional or a finance professional that has the tools to be able to help you out.
Well, Zandile, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing your expertise and your advice with our viewers. And I also want to thank you, our viewers, for watching. Until next time, I'm Shannon Jackson.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line, email us, or connect with us on social media.
Your mouth can do a lot of amazing things.